The new communication strategy is not to do what Bill Clinton used to do, where he would say, I feel your pain. Instead, it is to say, you're actually not in pain. So let's just, very short clip. Bill Clinton in the 1990s, it was all about empathy and sympathy. I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage, but it is very effective when it comes to politics. Sympathy I prefer more than empathy. That's a separate topic for a different time.
So that was Charlie Kirk saying that really doesn't like the term empathy. Oh, I don't like empathy. Okay, so why doesn't he like the term empathy? That's very interesting. It's weird. It's weird. I mean, who doesn't like empathy? I mean, okay, so I guess maybe to drill into this, why don't we define what empathy is? Which is the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from within their frame of reference, or the capacity to place oneself in another's position or in somebody else's shoes, basically. Now, is Charlie Kirk able to put himself into other people's shoes? Not unless he steals them first. I mean, that would be my guess, because knowing Charlie Kirk, he has no empathy. But that said, he prefers sympathy. Okay. So now, like, some people may use those terms, interchangeably. Maybe if they don't really know what either of them mean. But okay, all right. So now sympathy, that's defined as the feeling that you care about and are sorry about someone else's trouble, grief, misfortune, etc. All right. Now, again, the difference here between the two is that empathy creates a connection with somebody who is going through something terrible, suffering, right? Sympathy creates a barrier. It separates you from the person who is struggling. Empathy is our ability to understand how somebody feels, whereas sympathy is our relief in not having the same problems as another person. And that said, I'm not saying that there isn't an appropriate time for sympathy. Of course there is. There's also an important time for empathy as well. And when it comes to our political system, when it comes to policies that affect people's everyday life, you might want to stock up on a little bit more empathy instead of, oh, I feel sorry for you, bro. Not really much I can do, though. I'm just glad I'm not dealing with what you're dealing with. Now, this is very important to keep in mind when you're dealing with Republicans. Because what I've noticed here from people like Charlie Kirk, from the Candace Owens of the world, right? From all these chuds, the Dennis Pragers, is that they generally do not put themselves in other people's shoes in order to understand their troubles. No. These people actually play a perpetual victimhood. So, like, oh my God, conservatives, we're being hunted down. It's the worst time for conservatives. White men, they're doing so badly. Why doesn't anybody care for the white man? Well, look, we do. I'm a white man. I care for white men, obviously. I also have empathy for everyone else. But what they don't have for anyone else is empathy, or even in a lot of cases, sympathy. But they sure love to empathize with the fellow white man. Now, here's the thing, though. The reason they don't have any empathy is because, well, if you have empathy for other people, you might actually want to help them. And that is the main issue. They don't want to help other people because it's going to hurt their donors. You think the donors to Turning Point USA really want to pay a little bit more in taxes to help people who are disadvantaged, to help people who are disenfranchised? No, they do not. In fact, they lobby, they spend millions of dollars to avoid helping out people who are in actual need. Helping is woke. It's the wokeness. And that's why it's bad for some reason. But look, now, here's the thing, though. Don't get it confused. I'm not saying conservatives aren't capable of empathy. Of course they are. But it's not empathy for people who are outside their own social groups, their own insular communities, right? And there's a word for that. It's tribalism, essentially. They don't want to empathize with other groups outside of their immediate family or tribal group. Now, again, we do see pretty often in situations where conservatives, this is a good example, who are anti-LGBTQ, right? I don't like gay people. Oh, it turns out one of their family members is gay. And sometimes where you see these people will change their tune and go, oh my God, now I care. Now I care about empathy. Now, look, Jon Stewart did a fantastic segment on the transgender community, right? It was last week. He interviewed people who grew up conservative. And they happen to have a transgender child. Now, one of these families actually did something that I think is great. They supported their kid. Now, there was a price to pay because now within that conservative community, that group, that family was no longer part of the group. It was the other. They were the other. Kick them out. So they lost all their friends. They lost, a lot of things because they decided to have the temerity to stand up for their children. Yeah. Now, they developed, by the way, empathy. And suddenly they find that they didn't really belong as a conservative anymore. Now, that's a good reason to say that Charlie Kirk hates empathy. Because when you become empathetic, it really becomes anathema to American Christian and conservative values, right? And I say Christian conservative, American, and I mean Christian nationalist values, because that's what the right wing is now. That's what the Republican Party stands for. Now, if you're a Christian and you consider yourself to be like a Republican, but you haven't been paying attention to what your party's doing, you might want to take a look, especially if you do actually have empathy for other people. Because if you look at that, you're going to realize, oh my God, these people are not at all what Christ taught, said we should be. A little bit of self-reflection might help. But anyway, it's this empathy is anathema to the modern conservative movement, because if you start understanding other groups of people and wanting to help all these other groups of people instead of fearing and hating them or pitying them, you might actually feel compelled to stand up for them on their behalf and help them. The lack of empathy, though, towards anybody who's not part of their in-group explains a lot. It's why they can simultaneously be incredibly charitable towards people in their own community, to give to their church, etc., while at the same time being incredibly vicious towards the unhoused, towards immigrants, towards members of the LGBTQIA plus community. There is that duality. I mean, we all know the story. Well, it's not really a story, but kind of like the example of the, person who goes to church all the time, thinks they're a good person, but every time they pass by a homeless person, they sneer. Get a job. Or when they say, oh, that's so immoral, why doesn't she just cover up when it comes to somebody who is sexually harassed or assaulted? But then they go to church and they say, well, I'm a good person. I donate. I give to the church. What do you mean I'm a terrible person? That's exactly what we mean. You're terrible to people that are outside your group, that are different than you. And that matters. That matters a lot. Because, again, not to, come off like someone who is giving a sermon here, because I'm not even religious. I'm not even Christian, right? But it was one of those things where, yes, I've studied the Bible. I've read it, read a lot of it, read a lot of the teachings. Jesus Christ was a fan of people who were in the out group because he himself was a member of the out group. He was not part of the establishment. He was on the outside, whipping the bankers, chasing them out of the temple, hanging out with prostitutes. The Jesus of the Bible, kind of based. Whereas Charlie Kirk, not at all. So, yes, Charlie Kirk is also wrong, by the way, about this being some sort of new age thing. No, empathy has always existed in humankind. It's actually one of our strongest traits, that we can actually empathize with each other. It's how you can build diverse nations and advance things like social justice, rights for everybody. That's two things that right now the right wing in this country do not believe in, do not want. So it's no surprise that Kirk feels absolutely no empathy, because if he did, he wouldn't be a right winger.